Our speaker is a colleague of mine here in the Genealogy Center. She really is terrific in the amount and the depth of information that she provides to our patrons. And she is our Genealogy Center's expert in how to leverage, how to use, how to evaluate DNA results for your genealogical research. Her advice is just so meaningful for so many customers. And so many of them go away just like gobsmacked over, oh my gosh, you helped me so much. So I'm always delighted when Sarah agrees to give a DNA-based presentation. So our topic for this evening is one man's Y-DNA results. And I'm going to turn the time over to Sarah.
Tonight, as Kurt said, we are going to be talking about one man's Y-DNA results. Before we do that, we're just going to do a really quick overview of what Y-DNA is. So this is a test of the Y chromosome, and only men have a Y chromosome, males. So therefore, only males can take this test. It traces the male's direct paternal line, the father's 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 line, as shown on this diagram here, starting with the man at the bottom and going up to the left there, his father, his father, his father. It will provide you with a list of matches who share a common direct paternal ancestry within 25 generations, and also provides you with an ancestral migration route of your direct paternal line stretching back thousands of years. Now, the part that we are most interested in for genealogy is the list of matches. Now, why would you want to take a Y-DNA test? Well, so here are some reasons why some men have taken the Y-DNA test. It could answer questions on the direct paternal line of the male, including prove or disprove a theory of relationship, learn more about a brick wall ancestor, link up to family in the old country. What is your deep ancestry? What tribe or people group did you come from thousands of years ago? Or you might take one to help find your birth father. And I would mention that you want to take an autosomal test first. The Y chromosome test is kind of a secondary test to finding your birth father. Now, there's only the one company that offers this test right now, and that is the Family Tree DNA testing company. And you can order different levels of testing. There's a 37 marker test, a 111 marker test, and a big Y700 test. Any of the tests are fine. And you can see some little notes that I have put on the screen there about different levels of testing. They used to offer a 12, 25, and 67 marker test, but they don't offer those anymore. When you get your results, as mentioned before, you will hopefully get matches. And those matches are men that share a common paternal ancestry with you within 25 generations, often much closer than that. So some men will have different outcomes when they get their matches back. So this is 4 different types of scenarios. You might get no matches at all. And this happens about 30 to 40% of the time, just due to the fact that no one else of your paternal ancestry has taken this test. You might get matches to men with your surname only. Or you might get matches to men of your surname and other surnames as well. In those 2 scenarios, you want to go back to the genealogical research. You want to go back to looking at your matches and who their paternal ancestors are of the same surname as yours, and you want to work together with those matches to try to come up with who the common paternal ancestor might have been. So that is a best case scenario, that you get matches to men with your surname and you can work together with them. But there are a percentage of people that get matches to men with other surnames, and they don't get a match to anyone of their surname. And that can be a perplexing kind of situation for those men. What do they make of this? How can they really figure out what's going on when they get that kind of result? And so tonight's program is going to go through one man's results where he comes up with this situation here in point 4. So the man that we're talking about tonight, we're going to have to use his real last name because this is the name that his matches are also, well, this is the name of his paternal line. So we need to talk about that because that's the whole crux of the Y-DNA test. But we have changed his first name to protect his identity. And this is common when you listen to a DNA program, that the names of living people should be protected for their own privacy's sake. So Homer is not his real name. And Homer, I actually found out about this situation from Homer's relative, a cousin named Mary, and that's not her real name either. And Mary, being a woman, cannot take a Y chromosome test, right? So she had to get a male cousin of hers, and that would be Homer, to take the test so that she could learn more about the Rumple side of her family. And so here's what Homer knows about his Rumple side of the family, because remember, this Y chromosome test is only looking at his father's line. And so you can see he actually has it traced back fairly far back in time to some guys that were alive in the 1700s here. You go from Homer to his father, to Richard, to Trenton, to Daniel, then down here to Henry, Jacob, Johannes, and another Johannes. So this is the 1700s, maybe even the 1600s, that we have these Rumples and Rumples. Furthermore, you can see that the surname right now, Homer spells his surname with a B, but different generations of the family spelled it different ways. And it certainly was spelled quite a few times with a P as well. And this is very typical. This is not indicating any kind of problem with, the research. This is just very typical with a German immigrant origin, where you're going to have English speakers here in the US trying to make sense of what this name is and how to spell it. And it's possible that some of the ancestors on this line were illiterate and they did not know how to spell their name themselves. So it just, caused some creative spelling. So we're not going to be concerned about that, but we're going to see the name spelled in different ways tonight. So this family is of Germanic origin, and they have themselves back to a couple of immigrant ancestors, but the one we're going to talk about, I think he came over with his father, but we're going to talk about Johannes Jacob Rumple, born around 1721 in Germany. But what is important is that he came to the US, to Pennsylvania in colonial times, and he settled in Heidelberg Township, Northampton County, Pennsylvania, which is now in Lehigh County. And Homer has taken 2 different kinds of DNA tests. I believe he took them at the behest of his cousin Mary. And they didn't take these tests because they thought that there was a problem in their family tree or a mystery that they wanted to solve. They just took them because Mary and Homer were into genealogical research, and they wanted to see whether the DNA testing could help them with their genealogical research. And they also were just interested in the background of their family. So taking DNA tests can give you a lot of general information as well as specific information about your background. So he wasn't looking for anything, untoward when he took these tests. He's taken an ancestry DNA test, which is on an autosomal test. And that autosomal test looks at all of your lines, basically. So it covers both your mother and your father's side of the family and all your grandparents. And it will go back approximately to your 5th or 6th great grandparents. You'll have some matches descending from those great grandparents, maybe even your 7th. That's getting a little bit outside of the realm of the autosomal test, just because you have inherited such a small amount of autosomal DNA from those ancestors that far back. And when Homer got his ancestry DNA results back, he seemed to match to his known Rumple relatives as he expected. He matched to first cousins, he matched to second cousins, and everything seemed pretty normal as far as his autosomal matches went. He was matching to the correct people and so forth. He didn't seem to find any big unexplained things in his autosomal test results. He also took the family tree DNA Y chromosome test. He took the 111 marker. And when he got the results of that test back, he found that he had no matches to anyone named Rumple, but he had matches to 2 men of another surname. And that surname was Ebert. So Homer and Mary asked, basically, what does this mean? Why are we having these kind of matches? Could Homer's genealogical tree be incorrect? Was he really an Ebert on his paternal line somewhere? Sometime did an Ebert cross into the Rumple line and cause this Y chromosome result? So let's look at Homer's Y chromosome matches. This is his match page at Family Tree DNA. And this is what it would look like if you have taken a Y chromosome test and you're looking at your match list. Across the top here, you can see different markers. So you can see 12 markers and 25 markers. And these are basically not useful for genealogical research. They're just too general. So most of the time, you're not going to pay attention to who your matches are at this level. The first level that you want to pay attention to is the 37 marker match. And he's got 2 matches there, 267 and 111. And it's basically the same 2 people. So it's Gerald Ebert and Nelson Ebert. These are the names of the matches. And again, these are their real last names, but not their real first names. And you notice that there's nobody here named Rumple. And that's what, of course, Homer noticed as well. So does family tree DNA give you any clues about how you might be related to these matches? Yes, they do. So there's 2 spots on your match page that give you a generalized idea of how you might be related. And this is very generic. It's not very precise. So over here on the left by this arrow here, you can see genetic distance. And over here on the far right, you can see this symbol here that looks like it might be a graph. You can click on that, and that's going to be the tip calculator. So genetic distance, first of all, is basically just saying at the 111 marker level, which is what Homer has taken, the test that Homer has taken, and Gerald and Nelson have also had a 111 marker test done. They are matching on all markers except for 4 differences. So they have 4 differences out of 111. And both Gerald and Nelson have 4 distances from Homer. So that's the genetic distance. So when you go to this page here, which is found on Family Tree DNA's website, and you look at the 111 marker test here, and then you go down to 4 genetic distance, which is right here under 3 to 5, you can see that it says that they're related. And then it says your degree of matching is within the range of most well-established surname lineages in Western Europe. So this is not a very specific prediction. It just basically says, yes, you are related, and it's probably within the range of surname lineages. Now, the tip calculator, which was that graph symbol, is going to give us a little different information. So the tip calculator is telling you that the probability of Homer and Gerald, the top match, being related within a number of generations is this percentage. So within 8 generations, they could share a common ancestor. It's 86% likely that they share a common ancestor within 8 generations. It's almost 99% sure that it's by 12 generations. So based on what else we know and some other work that we've done on this, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, I think it is probably within 6 to 8 generations, maybe 10. So this actually turned out to be pretty good at predicting this. It's not always the case. These are very generalized predictions, and they're not going to be always exact. And you'll find that some people do have results that are kind of outside of the predictions. So just kind of keep that in mind, that these are to give you sort of an idea, but they're not set in stone. So let's circle back to, why would you not have matches to your own surname if you take a Y chromosome test? So people tend to panic when this happens and jump to conclusions. So my general guidance is to just say, don't panic, don't jump to conclusions. You need to be really kind of slow and methodical about trying to figure this out, and logical. And you might need an expert guidance if you're really kind of, perplexed and not sure what to do next. I'm going to go over some things that you can do next tonight. So hopefully you will be less perplexed at the end of this talk. Now, one or more of these explanations could apply to you. This would be why you have no matches to your surname. Number 1, no one related to your paternal line has tested yet. Number 2, your matches could be from a time previous to the adoption of fixed surnames. And 3, you or your matches of a different surname could have a non-paternity event in your paternal line. And we're going to go over all 3 of these in relation to Homer. So perhaps no one related to Homer's paternal line has tested yet. This explanation is one that I think people often overlook, because they want to instead believe that maybe their surname is really something else. But oftentimes it could just be that no one of your paternal line has tested yet. Remember that only about 1 to 2 million men have tested total in the whole entire world. So this Y chromosome testing has not taken off and become as widespread as the autosomal testing, for instance. I love to encourage people to take Y chromosome testing because I think it's a really interesting test, and we need to build up the database with more people. But because only about 1.5 million men have tested total in the whole entire world, you can understand why someone who's related to your paternal line may not have tested yet. We don't have samples from every man in the world or every paternal line in the world, not by a long shot. And if your paternal line is originating in another country quite recently, if you have come to this country as a recent immigrant, you're really going to face an uphill battle with your Y chromosome testing, because the vast majority of the test takers are North American and they're European in background. And so very few people in other countries are doing this testing, and especially non-European countries. So that's another problem. But the answer to really trying to get more matches for Homer is and this is the answer for most of you, is that you're going to have to recruit some people to test. And you want to make sure that your test result is not a fluke. So you want to test more men in your line. So if Homer has a second or a third cousin who's named Rumple, this is somebody that he might want to try to recruit and get to test, and just see and make sure that that cousin matches with Homer as he is expected to, because they both come from the same paternal line, Rumple ancestor. So you need to kind of generate your own matches when you don't have any. Now, the second scenario would be possibly Homer's paternal line was from a country or area that did not adopt fixed surnames until later in time. And Germany is not one of those countries. So Germany has adopted surnames early. So this scenario number 2 is probably not applicable to Homer. But if you are Scandinavian, if you are Jewish, some of the Scots-Irish run into this problem. Africa and parts of Asia also did not adopt surnames very early. So some of you who come from those types of backgrounds may find issues with getting your Y chromosome tested, where you get unexplained matches and you can't quite figure out why you're matching with these people. It could be because of the late adoption of surnames in your tradition of your family background. Okay, the third possible scenario is the one that people like to go to, and that is that Homer or his Ebert matches may have a non-paternity event in their direct paternal lineage. So a non-paternal event is sometimes abbreviated NPE, is basically an ancestor whose biological father was not the person who it was reported to be. So on the family genealogical records, it looks like the father is this person, but really biologically, it's another person. And this could be for various reasons. Some that come to mind include an unknown adoption in the family, an unknown name change in the family, someone taking the surname of a stepfather or their maternal grandfather, and then, of course, affairs. So if a woman who is married has a child with a man that's not her husband, that child is probably going to take the surname of the husband, even though he was actually the biological child of another man. So any of these situations could cause, a strange DNA result when you are testing your Y chromosome line. So how do we investigate this theory? Well, you need to work collaboratively with the matches. That's number one. So to look into whether Homer or his Ebert matches have a non-paternity event in their tree, we're going to follow these steps. And these are not set in stone. These are just some steps that I have written down here, but these will work for most of you. So if you have a situation like this, like Homer has, you want to collaborate with your matches, find out who they are and what their paternal line is. You want to upgrade your kit to a higher level. If you're only at the 37 marker level, you need to get up to the 111 at least. Sometimes it might help to go to big Y. You both have to test more family members. So in this case, we've got Homer needs to test more Rumple family members, and the Eberts need to test more Ebert family members. Reviewing the autosomal DNA matches may help. More genealogical research may help. And it's going to take you a while to get through all of these steps. So after you complete all of the 6 steps, you can reevaluate the situation and see where you are now. So how to contact your matches. So this is again Homer's match page at Family Tree DNA. You're going to click on the match's name over there on the left, and it will open up a new screen that gives you the match's email address. You also may be able to view the matches tree or some information about their family over to the right there. Under the first arrow, you can see a field that says paternal earliest known ancestor, and then it says not available. So that means that Gerald and Nelson did not enter their paternal earliest known ancestor. They could have, but they just didn't. Now, the second arrow is pointing at a family tree icon. And so you can see that Gerald has a lightened family tree icon, and then Nelson's family tree icon is darkened. That means that Nelson has actually put a family tree on the Family Tree DNA website. So if we clicked on that, we could view Nelson's tree, which is very useful, and we're grateful to Nelson for doing that. So after Homer and Mary have contacted these eBirds, they got the following information out of them. Both Gerald and Nelson replied, so that's very wonderful. Gerald said that his earliest known ancestor is a German immigrant to Pennsylvania called Johannes Ebert, who was born around 1738. Nelson said that his last name is not Ebert, and he found out through taking this test that his father had changed his name to a completely different name and kept that a secret. So Nelson is related to Gerald, and Gerald, of course, has the known earliest Ebert ancestor back in Pennsylvania there. So we'll look at the Ebert tree. And this shows a lineage going back from an Ebert descendant all the way back to this Jacob, to William, to Samuel, to Johann. This is Johann Lawrence, and this is Johann Ebert, the immigrant. Now, when your match has a tree like this, you know, if it looks a little fishy to you, if it seems sketchy to you in places, you might want to try to duplicate their research and see if you can come up with the same results. Because we all know some people have put trees onto these online sites that have tiny little errors in them, or may have bigger, more significant errors. And so you just kind of want to check that out a little bit. So what else did the Eberts know about their earliest ancestor? Well, quite a lot, actually. He's from Germany, and his family settled in the U.S. in Heidelberg Township, Northampton County, Pennsylvania, in about the 1730s or 40s. Now, does anyone recognize that place? Well, yes. This is the same place that the Rumples were living when they immigrated to the U.S. There was one German-speaking church, apparently, in this Heidelberg Township, and it was called the Heidelberg Church. And both families attended this same church at the same time. We can find that both families, the Eberts and the Rumples, were having children baptized into the same church in the 1760s. So this puts the two families in the same place at the same time, at least in the 1760s. This means that they would have known each other, at least by sight, likely lived nearby to one another, and were associates. And so there could have been some kind of intermixing, shall we say, between the two families, either through a marriage or through an extramarital relationship. So going back to the Y-DNA results, if we think that the Y-DNA results are indicating that somebody had an NPE in their family, was it the Ebert line or the Rumple line that had the NPE? Did Mr. Ebert father a child with Mrs. Rumple? Or did Mr. Rumple father a child with Mrs. Ebert? Those are two possible scenarios. A third scenario would be an unmarried daughter of one of the families had a son with the teenage boy in the neighboring family, but gave the child her maiden name. So these are all possibilities. And why do I think they're possibilities? Because of the combination of the Y-DNA results and then the genealogical research that point to the families being associates and possibly neighbors of one another in the 1760s. So for there to possibly be an NPE, it could very well have happened during that time period when the two families were living next door to each other. Now, how do we actually test this? How do we prove this? It's not necessarily easy. You're going to have to test more family members in both families to confirm this theory. So which additional family members are we going to test? Now, this is where things get a little hairy, and so I hope you can follow this. The immigrant ancestor of the Rumple family, so this is Homer's family, begins with a Johannes Rumple, born 1721. He and his wife, Anna Katharina, and we don't know Anna Katharina's maiden name. I guess there's some guesses as to what it might be. They had a number of children that are documented. You can see they have Johann Conrad, Katharina, Johannes John, Johanna Hannah, Johann Friedrich, Jacob, Johannes Daniel, George, Philip, and Johann Peter. So they had a number of children. And Homer descends from this Jacob here, where the arrow is. So this is the line that he comes down from. So if Jacob's father was somebody else, was maybe Mr. Ebert, we need to check out who the fathers of some of these other brothers. So there are plenty of brothers here of Jacob, and one of them, at least one of these other brothers, should have a modern day descendant whose last name would be Rumple, who could also test his Y DNA. And that's what my suggestion is for the Rumples, is that they get at least one descendant from these other brothers, and possibly more than one. Since they have so many brothers, they have an embarrassment of riches here. If they can get more than one brother, perhaps, I mean, we don't want to besmirch her name, but perhaps Anna Katharina had children with a few different men. We'd want to find out if she had any children with Rumple. So you'd want to check, I would say, at least a couple of descendants of a couple of the other brothers. Now, so I asked Homer and Mary about this, and they fortunately knew somebody right away. They said that they had a cousin named Don Rumple. He's right here on the tree. Here's Homer over here. Here's Johannes, the immigrant, and wife, Anna Katharina. And so remember, we've already tested Homer. We're trying to get descendants of his brothers, of the brothers of Jacob here. So this Johannes Rumple, born 1758, he has a descendant named Don Rumple. And this guy has agreed to take a Y DNA test. And it has not been, we don't have the results yet. So we're waiting on that. But basically, Don's results are going to tell us one of two things. Either Don is going to match Homer, or Don is not going to match Homer. Theoretically, they should both match. If they both had, if Jacob, who's Homer's ancestor, and Johannes, who is Don's ancestor, both had the same father, Johannes, born 1721, then their Y DNA results should match each other, right? So if they don't, then we have more evaluation to do to try to figure out what's going on. So that's what we're basically waiting for at this time, is that to see whether the results come back as a match or not. Now, the Eberts should do the same thing. So the Eberts, immigrant ancestor, I may not have the best tree for this family, but from what I could tell, there's not as much information in the online trees about this family. They may have had more children, but I see on this tree that we've got Johann Ebert as the immigrant ancestor, born around 1738, 1740, married to Mary Susanna. Again, her surname appears to be unknown. And at least 3 children, Conrad, Johann Lawrence, and Adam. Now, Gerald descends from this Lawrence here. So this line is already tested. So in order to kind of double check what's going on with the Ebert line, they need to find a descendant of Conrad or a descendant of Adam in order and ask them to take a Y DNA test. So again, you know, if these three brothers, Johann Lawrence, Conrad, and Adam, all share the same father of Johannes Ebert, then their DNA results are going to match each other on the Y chromosome. So I don't believe that they have found a cousin to take the test yet. So I'm just saying they need to find a cousin. Gerald Ebert needs to find a cousin descended from one of those other brothers. And we have to wait for those test results to come back. And then we'll reevaluate the situation. Now, so basically we're awaiting further test results. We cannot solve this with any kind of certainty until we get more Rumples that test and more Eberts that test. And I hope you can see why that is. Because right now we don't know why the two families are matching yet. We've got them living in the same area. We're speculating that there was a Rumple that fathered an Ebert or an Ebert that fathered a Rumple. And it wasn't recorded that way. And so leading to this confusion, but we don't know that for sure. And we don't know which way it happened, whether it was the Rumple that did it or the Ebert that did it. So we still await more test results and more evaluation of this. Now, can we use autosomal DNA? Yes and no. So as I said earlier, autosomal DNA is you have autosomal DNA from your ancestors going back to, you have measurable autosomal DNA from your ancestors going back to probably your 5th, 6th, and 7th great grandparents. But after that, you don't have measurable DNA basically from those ancestors. And so you're not going to show up with matches that are coming down from that same ancestor on the autosomal test. It really kind of stops around the 5th and 6th great grandparent level. That is almost precisely the level that we're at with Homer. So Johannes the immigrant, Johannes Rumple the immigrant, is his 5th great grandfather. So will he have autosomal DNA matches to these Rumples that far back? We'll have to see here. But it's right on the edge of where you might expect to have some autosomal DNA matches. So to really kind of verify your family tree through the autosomal DNA testing, you want to go back methodically generation by generation and look for matches to your ancestor's siblings. So he should start with his father. So Homer Rumble should start with his father. So Father Rumble. Did Father Rumble have siblings? And does Homer have matches to descendants of those siblings? So basically, does he have matches to like some first cousins or first cousins once removed? If he can say yes, then he can go back to the next generation and look at his paternal grandfather Rumble's siblings. And does he have matches to those people, descendants from those people? And if he says yes, then he can go back to his great grandfather Rumble's siblings and so forth. And you keep doing this until you get back to the immigrant Rumple, if you can. So when we do that with Homer, so Homer has taken the ancestry DNA test, we can see that Homer does have matches to this family. So here is Homer's ancestor again. So he comes from Jacob here, born 1767. And Jacob's parents are supposed to be this Johannes, 1721, and Anna, unknown. Jacob had all those brothers and sisters. So he had, this is Johannes Daniel here on the right, and this is Eva Elizabeth here in the middle. And then on the far left is Johannes Friedrich. And you can see that Homer has DNA matches to descendants of Johann Friedrich, Eva, Johannes Daniel, and he has more that I didn't show on the screen because there were so many. Now, this is telling us that Homer has DNA matches to these people because he has a common ancestor with them. And typically you would expect it to be the ancestor couple, so both Johannes and Anna. But if we're looking at a possible Ebert being involved here, then it could be that these are only half siblings, like Jacob is only half siblings with Johannes Daniel and half siblings with Eva. They would still share DNA because they'd share the same mother, but they might have had different fathers. So this is not telling us, therefore, that if Jacob is full or half siblings with these people. It's just saying that Homer is sharing DNA with their descendants, and he would share DNA with the descendants even if he was only coming down from Anna. So this hasn't really proved anything. We have to go back a generation further to Johannes Rumple, 1721. So Johannes Rumple, 1721, we know who his parents are, supposedly, although this looks like a sketchy tree to me. So I don't know how correct this information is. But if we take this information in this tree as being correct, we have the name of his parents, Johann Jacob Rumple and Maria Magdalena Geisel. And so Maria Magdalena Geisel could be the key to this. So can she be fully identified? So from that tree, it looks like little is known about her and her family. So can more genealogical research be done about her? Is she really the mother of that Johannes, born 1721? So if this can be developed, if this lead can be developed, and Homer can find that he has autosomal matches to proven descendants of this Geisel family, then he should be able to postulate that her son, Mary Magdalena's son, Johannes Rumple, is indeed the father of Jacob, Homer's ancestor, that there was no infidelity with an Ebert at that level, that you've proven that that basically Johannes Rumple was his biological father. So there's a lot. This is kind of sketchy. This is back in the 7th great-grandmother. And so autosomal DNA may not even really provide any matches that far back, because it's really on the edge of where autosomal DNA kind of goes. But this is something that they could work on to see whether they can develop this Geisel line at all. Switching over to Gerald Ebert, he has also taken Ancestry DNA. And so he needs to do the same thing with his DNA matches. He needs to go back methodically, generation by generation, to see whether he has matches descended from his Ebert father's siblings, his paternal grandfather Ebert's siblings, and so forth, going back to the immigrant Ebert. And when we do that, we can see that he does have matches going back to all these different Eberts, going back to this Samuel Ebert, born 1820. So he has matches to different siblings, descendants. So John Eberts and Sarah Salome Eberts. So back to this point, it looks like Gerald's tree is solid. He's getting autosomal matches to descendants of siblings. Their father is this Johann Ebert, 1766. So it's looking good up to this point. Then you get back to that next generation and you look at that Johann Ebert, 1766. His father is supposed to be the immigrant, Johannes, born around 1738 or 40. That Johannes had 2 other children, Conrad and Adam. But Gerald is not showing as matching with descendants of these 2 children on the autosomal DNA. Now, is this significant? I don't know. It possibly is. But again, we need more information. It is possible that no descendants of Conrad or Adam have tested at Ancestry, and that is simply the reason why he has no matches to this family. You can't match with people who haven't tested. So perhaps tracking down some living descendants of Conrad and Adam and getting them onto Ancestry DNA testing would be a possible next step for this situation right here. Now, interestingly enough, Gerald does have matches to siblings of Jacob Rumple. So remember that this is Johannes, the immigrant, on the Rumple side. Gerald is showing matches with somebody that is descended from Johann Friedrich, Johann George, and Philip. And he also matches with Homer Rumble on the autosomal test. So there's definitely something going on. We haven't really gotten to the bottom of it yet. So I'm saying basically this research is still in progress, and I hope you're not going to be mad at me, because we're going to have to end it here and basically say we're still working on this problem. But I wanted to give you the steps. I wanted to lay it all out for you so that if you are in this situation, you can start working on trying to resolve your Y chromosome mystery. And so the steps that we're still working on, we're trying to test more family members in Homer's paternal line. This is the Rumple side, and more people in the Ebert paternal line. This will be ordering Y chromosome tests for more people in both of those families. The review of the autosomal DNA matches for clues is not quite done. There's that Giesel line that I was talking about, that maybe that they could develop that and try to work on that. There's more genealogical research to be done. Let's try to find these two families' farms on a map and see whether they actually were living very close to one another, where they would have been in contact on a very regular basis. That would add more credence to our theory. And then we're waiting for all of these steps to be completed. We have to then reevaluate the situation and come up with, is our scenario feasible, or do we have to go back to the drawing board and try to come up with another reason why the two families are matching on the Y DNA test? So we're still not there. We're still working on this. And I really do hope to provide an update for you at some time in the future on this. So I guess we are ready for some questions.
Very good. And thank you so much, Sarah. That was both interesting and informative as usual. So thank you. Thank you for that. Surprise of surprise, we do have some questions. I'd like to start out with two that I think are related in a general concept. So Maureen asked, when did Irish people adopt surnames as opposed to Scots Irish?
Gosh, that's not my, I don't really know the answer to that. I could possibly look it up for you if you wanted to send us an email to the Genealogy Center website. I do know that the Scots Irish in the clan system did not adopt surnames until later on. So there were a number of people that were, in the same clan together that may have had the same paternal ancestor, and then they did adopt different surnames, and it kind of confused everything. So that's what I was really referring to when I said some of the Scots Irish did not adopt surnames until later.
Sure. Fair, very fair. Catherine earlier asked, please explain more about how far back you are talking about in relation to Scots Irish surnames. But again, that's basically the same answer. Just send an email to genealogy@acpl.info, and we will endeavor to find you a good answer. So Christine asks, should the Y DNA matches have the same haplogroup? I have a Y DNA match with a different surname and one step difference, but a different haplogroup. What to make of that?
I would say yes and no. So depending on the level of testing that you have done, or your male relative, because obviously Christine did not take the Y chromosome test, but depending on the level of testing that you have done and the match has done, he may have taken a more sophisticated level of testing than you have. If he took the big Y, he's going to have a different haplogroup ending than you do. He'll have a different he just has done a higher level of testing. And so you'll both really have the same mother or father, I guess, haplogroup, like parent haplogroup, but he's done a more detailed test than you have. And so it looks like it's a totally different haplogroup, but it's not. If you Google it and look at, compare the two, you'll see they're in the same family. And they basically, one of you is tested at a higher level than the other.
Excellent.
So if
Thank
you
you.
had both tested at big Y, you'd have the same, you'd most likely have the same haplogroup exactly.
Excellent. That's a great piece of advice. Thank you for that, Sarah. So Karen asked, both my brother and I have taken the ancestry autosomal test. I have explored mine, but not his so much. Would he be more likely to show matches to our surname than I? I assume she means by taking the Y DNA. I have not found male ancestors on my own, but might I find some on his?
I'm not sure. I think I see what you're getting at. I think she means that on her autosomal testing that she's not showing matches to her surname. I would do kind of a bit of a comparison between your matches and your brother's matches. If you've both taken the ancestry autosomal test, the first thing I would look at is make sure that the ancestry test is giving you the relationship between you and your brother. Does it say that you are full siblings, or does it say something like you are close relatives? If it says close relatives, then you may not be full siblings. And I don't want to shock you by saying that, but that is usually indicative of a half sibling situation. And so just double check your relationship, first of all, between you and your brother that ancestry is predicting. But no, you both should have, if you're full siblings and you both have, which would indicate that you have the same father, you both should have matches in the autosomal DNA to your father's side of the family. So doing that comparison of both of your matches, if you have a first cousin on your dad's side that is tested, make sure that both of you are showed as matching to that first cousin. Kind of that kind of thing. Or if you have a first cousin, maybe ask them to test, if your dad has a brother or sister with children. So just kind of poke around there and see what's going on. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, Karen. And if you want, more, specialized advice, if you find something unexpected, do send us an email and I will probably be the one to answer that.
Great. Nice sage piece of advice there, Sarah. Next question, is there a good time sale in parens that we can upgrade a test or to buy a new test?
They just had a big sale, unfortunately, for Father's Day, so we just missed it. They used to have a sale in July every year, and I'm not positive if they're still doing that anymore. The next big sale will be around Christmas time, so they'll probably start the sale Black Friday, Thanksgiving time, and go all the way to Christmas, or sometimes they go all the way to New Year's. So
last quarter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Would GEDmatch be a useful source to solve this problem? And I don't know which problem Earl is referring to. Maybe the very long question that we're just not going to have time to read and unpack.
I wonder if he means the Rumple problem that we talked about.
Okay.
Tonight. Earl, maybe. We didn't use GEDmatch at all, but could be. But GEDmatch is autosomal. Remember that. And mostly we were talking about Y chromosome tonight. We did sprinkle in a little autosomal, but.
So Karen writes, when you have matches on the Y DNA test, but no common ancestors, what is the next step?
Well, if you mean that, they're of a different surname than yours, then you're going to have to go through some of the steps we talked about tonight, really. Talk to that person, try to find out what their background is. Maybe recruit somebody else from your family to test. So if you're thinking, gosh, I don't know why my family, is not matching with men of our surname, try to find another relative on your male side to test, like a second or third cousin, maybe, if you know somebody in that generation with the right surname, and see, just to kind of double check that everything's all right. Basically, that cousin should match with your brother or whoever it is that's taking the test.
Excellent. Excellent. So a few more questions here. My screen locked for just a moment. Let me pull this up. There we go. What about surname group projects on family tree DNA?
Yes. So that is something that I didn't really allude to tonight. Some of the surname groups at family DNA, tree DNA, and mine, for example, is one of them. My mother's maiden name is Mitchell, and we have a Mitchell surname group where there's an administrator. It happens to be me, but there's an administrator, a volunteer administrator, who basically kind of supervises the Mitchell DNA matches, and I make little charts and graphs, and I send people emails and remind them of, oh, you're matching with so-and-so. Can you guys please share information? And I try to help out as best I can with the Mitchells. So Family Tree DNA has a number of projects that have not been adopted, like basically I've adopted the Mitchell project. Okay, so right. As far as Lois's question goes, I don't believe that the surnames that she's interested in have been adopted by a surname administrator. So they're kind of like an orphan project. But if you find a project on Family Tree DNA where there is an administrator and they're working on it, you can really get a lot of help and a lot of guidance from that administrator. But if there's no administrator for your surname, you can just email Family Tree DNA, and they will, their customer service is good from what I understand, and they will answer emails and try to explain to you what's going on with your matches and such.
Okay, so thank you. So someone asked, both of the two Y DNA matches only tested to the 111 level. Would the big Y test add something new or anything new?
Yeah, I see that. Okay, so this is for MUN. MUN, I don't know, because I don't know your situation. Are those matches matching you? Are they from your own surname? And do you know who they are already? Have you kind of worked together with these matches and found the common paternal ancestor? If you have, there's probably not any big need to do now, every case is a little different. So I'd really need to know a little bit more about what you're trying to do and how far, you are on that, to see whether the big Y would be helpful. Right. Big Y is being used now. It is an expensive test. It costs about $450 to $500. Not sure the exact amount. It does go on sale. A lot of people are using it. Our Mitchell group is using it. We're able to kind of figure out some things that we hadn't been able to figure out before by upgrading to the big Y. It's kind of a big lift, a heavy lift, to get people that are tested at the 37 marker level test to upgrade to the big Y, because it's going to cost them about $300 or $400 more to do that. And a lot of them don't want to do it. They don't see the value of it. But if you can get them to do it, it's usually, it may be beneficial depending on the situation. So yeah, I don't know exactly what your situation is, MUN, so I can't really say for sure, but you can always send us an email and tell us more.
Right. Excellent. Well, we are very close to at time. If we haven't gotten to your questions, and all of them are really valid, very, very good questions. So some of them may be just hard to digest in this brief amount of time that we have. So I would just encourage everyone who hasn't had their question answered, please send that question to genealogy@acpl.info, and we will embark upon answering that question. And I think we have a really good track record of doing that. A couple questions had to do with not specific, not targeted Y DNA, but those are legitimate questions as well, and we'll be happy to help you out with those. So I'm going to close for this evening by thanking you, Sarah, for another great presentation. A lot of kudos in the chat and appreciation for your expertise in your presentation. And I want to thank all of you who attended this evening for your time and your zeal to know more about leveraging DNA results to find our families and our family stories. So kudos to all of you for doing that. From Fort Wayne, Indiana, the Allen County Public Library's Genealogy Center, I wish you a very good rest of your day and much continued and increased success in your genealogical endeavors with Y-DNA results. Have a good evening and tune in again on Tuesday. Good night.